My name is Alice Little Deer.
My name is Michael Loft.
My name is Raymond Mason.
I'm Madeline Dion Stout.
I spent about 8 years in residential school.
My dad attended residential school for 11 continuous years.
I attended residential school for 12 years.
I attended Blue Quills Residential School for 36 consecutive months.
The treatment of First Nations people has caused a stain in Canadian history, and it will never be washed away. From the beginning of the 1860s to 1996, about 150,000 First Nation students aged 4 to 16 attended these schools. It was in these schools where the children would be tortured mentally, physically, and sexually. The Canadian government would create these schools for the Aboriginal children so they could lose their culture and way of life. The government started these schools where children could voluntarily enter the school, then later started forcefully taking children away from their parents.
I remember them taking me away from my mother and my stepfather. And I can hear them telling my mom that that was the best thing for me.
The custody of the child became the government, and the parents would be punished for hiding the children from the government officials who would come to take the children. The 139 registered schools would be held in various churches around the country. In these schools, they would make the children more civilized. When a child completes his or her schooling, they would then be given the rights of the likes of the white.
Education Week with films of an Indian residential school. They learn not only games and traditions, but the mastery of words.
The government would have advertisements for schools showcasing the benefits, but all that truly happened was devastating lessons, removing their culture, language, and lifestyle.
I got strapped, I got beaten up for speaking my own native tongue. I even had my tongue pulled out and pinched,
People used to beat up the other children, like boys. The boys got the most beating.
And hurting the children, which could be done through physical violence, not providing food for the children, public shaming, locking one in a room, closet, or cage, or even raping the child. Electroshock treatments would also be used to harm the child. The conditions as well were not sufficient. Children would freeze to death, not be provided the right medical care, be forced to shower with toxic chemicals, and were lacking nutrients, as well as a steady diet and intake of food. Only 3,201 deaths were ever reported. About 1 every 45 Aboriginal students would die from these schools, many of which were given unmarked graves and families were not notified.
Not sure we'll ever get a final answer, but I'm absolutely convinced the number is much higher, perhaps as much as 5 to 10 times as high as that. It's because the records are so poor.
The children would be prone to various diseases and treatments causing death.
Indian children in the residential schools die at a much higher rate than in their villages. But this does not justify a change in the policy of this department, which is geared towards a final solution of our Indian problem.
He couldn't connect with them. He couldn't connect because he couldn't speak the language. He didn't understand the culture.
Once they finished the school, the Aboriginals lost a connection to their parents and their culture since they were removed for so long. Many even forgot their language and could not communicate to their friends and family. After attending the school, many residential school alumni would turn to addiction or drugs and alcohol. The suffering did not just stop with the survivors. The problem then turned to their children. Due to the frustrations from the residential school survivors, they may have then passed the disciplinary techniques of the residential schools onto their children.
One of the people who abused me and my family had been a residential school survivor.
Generally, the survivors of residential school do not commit suicide any more than the general population. It's the children of the residential school survivors who commit suicide in incredibly high numbers.
As the years progressed, the residential school survivors began to speak out, such as Phil Fontaine, who demanded an apology. In 2007, the Canadian government formalized a $1.9 billion compensation package for the residential school survivors. As of September 30th, 2013, 105,548 cases had been represented and about $1.6 billion had been paid. In 2008, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was formed to help survivors emotionally by telling their stories, as well as promoting the extent and impact of residential school experiences. I have selected this moment since I have been personally impacted by this event. While coming home from the cottage, I met a residential school survivor at the Watang Ojibwe Center. While talking to him, I learned about his experience and how he was impacted. It was because of him and his experience is why I chose this event.
The absence of an apology has been an impediment to healing and reconciliation. Therefore, on behalf of the Government of Canada and all Canadians, I stand before you in this chamber so vital, so central to our existence as a country, to apologize to Aboriginal peoples for the role the Government of Canada played in the Indian residential schools.
This is significant since it left such a huge mark on Canada's people, society, as well as the government. There is no true way to fully recover from the event.